They say we all have a price, a number that would make us do the unthinkable. For Elena Ramirez, that number was $250,000. It wasn't a price for a mansion or a sports car or a life of luxury. It was the price of a heartbeat, her sister's heartbeat. This is the story of a desperate bargain, a shocking secret, and a love that was never part of the deal. Elena's world was small, but it was full of love. It revolved around one person, her sister, Sophia. After their parents passed away, Elena made a promise, a silent vow that she would be Sophia's rock, her protector, her everything. She worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. By day, she served coffee and cleared tables at a bustling city diner, smiling through the exhaustion. By night, she was a ghost, a janitor in a silent, towering skyscraper of glass and steel known as the Davenport Tower. The building was a symbol of everything she wasn't: powerful, wealthy, and untouchable. She would scrub the floors of boardrooms where deals worth millions were made, wiping away the footprints of men who would never even see her. She was invisible, and that's how she liked it. It was simple. It was honest work. But life has a cruel way of shattering simplicity. Sophia, born with a fragile heart, was getting worse. The doctors used words that sounded like a death sentence: rare congenital condition, rapid deterioration. And finally, the 2 words that broke Elena's world: experimental surgery. A new procedure, their only hope. It was revolutionary, life-saving, and of course, astronomically expensive. $250,000. Insurance wouldn't touch it. It was a last resort, they said. For Elena, it was the only resort. She pleaded with the banks. She tried to take out loans. But for a woman with 2 minimum-wage jobs and no assets, she might as well have been asking for a key to the city. Every door slammed shut in her face. Every no felt like a shovelful of dirt on a future she was trying so desperately to save. The days blurred into a haze of worry. The nights in the Davenport Tower became heavier. The gleaming floors seemed to mock her. The empty offices felt like tombs of forgotten dreams. She would often pause on the 48th floor, the executive level, and stare out at the city lights. A million lights, a million lives, a million stories. And here she was, in this temple of power, feeling more powerless than ever. She wasn't just mopping floors anymore. She was drowning. Drowning in debt she didn't have, for a surgery she couldn't afford, to save the only person who made her world feel real. She would look at her reflection in the polished marble, a tired girl in a janitor's uniform, and ask the silent building a question. What do you do? What do you do when love isn't enough? The silence that answered was cold, profound, and terrifying. She was running out of time. Sophia was running out of time. The clock was ticking, and with every tick, the hope was fading, leaving only the cold, hard reality of that impossible number. She had reached the end of the line. She was ready to give up. But she had no idea that in the darkest corner of her despair, a hand was about to reach out, not with pity, but with a proposition so strange, so impossible, it could only have been born in the silent corridors of the 48th floor. Elena spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Standing by the window, shrouded in shadows, was a man. She had never seen anyone work this late on the executive floor. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, his face sharp and unreadable. He wasn't looking at her with pity, but with an unnerving, analytical intensity. This was Julian Davenport. Though to Elena, he was just a stranger, a man who had somehow witnessed her most private moment of despair. She quickly wiped her tears, mumbling an apology, getting ready to leave his office. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't realize anyone was here. I'll come back later." He didn't move. He just watched her, his gaze making her feel even more exposed than her tears had. "I overheard your phone call earlier," he said, his voice calm and even. "With the hospital billing department." Eleanor froze. He knew. He had heard her begging, her voice cracking as she pleaded for a payment plan she knew she could never meet. The shame was a hot flush on her cheeks. She was just the janitor, a nobody. Now she was the janitor who cried about her bills in front of one of the powerful men whose messes she cleaned up. But what he said next wasn't what she expected. There was no, "I'm sorry for your troubles," or "I'll pray for you." There was only business. "I have a proposition for you," he stated, stepping out of the shadows. His face was handsome, but stern, as if carved from stone. "It is unconventional. You may find it insulting, but I believe it could be mutually beneficial." Eleanor stared at him confused. What kind of proposition could a man like him have for a woman like her? He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. Hesitantly, she sat down, her janitor's cart standing awkwardly beside the expensive leather. It was a clash of two worlds. "You need $250,000, he said, not as a question, but as a fact. "I can provide it, in full, the entire amount wired to the hospital's account by tomorrow morning." Elena's breath caught. Was this a joke? A cruel prank? What would I have to do? She whispered, her mind racing through a list of terrible possibilities. Julian leaned forward, his hands clasped on the polished desk. His expression didn't change. It remained intensely serious. "You would have to marry me," he said. The storm outside cracked with thunder at that exact moment, as if the sky itself was shocked. Elena just stared, speechless. Marry him? A complete stranger? It made no sense. "We would be husband and wife in name only," he continued, as if discussing a corporate merger. "The arrangement would last for 1 year. You would live in my home. You would, on occasion, be required to attend certain events with me. At the end of the year, we would divorce quietly. You would be free to go, and the debt for the surgery would be considered paid in full. No contact necessary ever again." He slid a pen and a blank piece of paper across the desk. "This is not an emotional proposal," he finished, his voice cold as ice. "It is a contract, a solution to both of our problems. Your sister gets her life-saving surgery, and I get what I need." He never specified what that was. He didn't need to. In that moment, he held all the power. Elena's head was spinning. It was insane. It was immoral. It was everything she was raised to believe was wrong. It was a deal with the devil in a $1,000 suit. But then, an image of Sophia, pale and weak in her hospital bed, flashed through her mind. Sophia's smile, Sophia's laugh, the promise she had made. The devil was offering her sister's life on a silver platter. What do you do when salvation comes in the form of a cage? When a stranger offers you a miracle but asks for your life in return? For Elena, the choice was no choice at all. The 24 hours that followed the proposition were a blur. Elena didn't sleep. She sat by Sophia's bedside, holding her hand, watching her breathe. She told her sister that she'd found a solution. A charity grant, she lied. The relief in Sophia's eyes was a sharp, painful stab of guilt in Elena's heart. How could she explain the truth? That she was selling a year of her life, her name, her freedom, to a cold, enigmatic stranger she met in an office she used to clean? She couldn't. So she buried the truth deep inside, a toxic secret that was already starting to poison her from within. Julian was true to his word. The morning after their deal, he sent her a text message. It wasn't a romantic note. It was a screenshot of a bank transfer confirmation, $250,000 paid in full to the hospital. Elena felt a wave of relief, so powerful it almost brought her to her knees, immediately followed by a wave of dread that was just as strong. The deal was done. Their wedding day was as sterile as a hospital room. They met at City Hall. Julian was punctual, his face as unreadable as ever. He didn't compliment her dress. He didn't smile. He simply handed her the paperwork. "My lawyer drafted the prenuptial agreement," he said, his voice low. "It protects us both. It states the terms of our arrangement clearly. After 365 days, our marriage will be dissolved." Eleanor's hands trembled as she signed the documents. Her signature, usually so fluid and sure, looked like the scratching of a frightened animal. She was signing away her name, signing herself into a contract that felt more like a prison sentence than a marriage certificate. The justice of the peace recited the vows in a monotone drone. The words, "to have and to hold, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health," tasting like ash in Elena's mouth. Richer? She was marrying a man of obvious wealth, but she had never felt poorer in spirit. Sickness and health. She was doing this for Sophia's health, but the arrangement itself felt like a sickness in her soul. When he was prompted to put the ring on her finger, he produced a simple, elegant platinum band. It was cold against her skin. It felt heavy, like a shackle. She looked into his eyes, searching for a flicker of something, doubt, regret, anything. But there was nothing. Only the same cool, detached intensity she saw in his office. It was done. They were husband and wife. Two strangers bound by a desperate secret. As they walked out of City Hall into the harsh daylight, there was no celebratory kiss, no holding hands. He simply opened the door to a sleek black car she hadn't noticed before. A driver was waiting. "My driver will take you to your new home," Julian said, checking his watch. "I have a meeting. I will see you this evening. The housekeeper will show you to your room." And just like that, he was gone, striding down the street, already absorbed in a phone call. The surgery was scheduled. Sophia was safe. Elena had won. But as the car sped away, leaving the life she knew behind, she couldn't escape the terrifying feeling that she had just lost something far more important: herself. The contract was signed, the price was paid, but the cost was still being calculated. The car pulled up to a luxury high-rise that made the Davenport Tower look modest. This wasn't just a building. It was a statement. The doorman, dressed in a crisp uniform, addressed her as Mrs. Davenport, and the name felt alien, a costume she was wearing. The elevator ascended in silence, whisking her up to a world she had only ever dreamed of. The penthouse was staggering. Windows on every wall offered a godlike view of the entire city. The furniture was sleek and modern, the kind that looked beautiful but felt uncomfortable. There was art on the walls that was probably worth more than her old apartment building, and a kitchen so high-tech she was afraid to touch anything. A stern-looking housekeeper named Mrs. Gable gave her a brisk tour, her face a mask of professional indifference. "This will be your wing, madam," she said, gesturing to a hallway. "Mr. Davenport's quarters are on the opposite side of the residence." Her wing was larger than her entire old apartment. It had a bedroom with a king-sized bed, a walk-in closet filled with new clothes in her size, a discovery that was both thoughtful and deeply unsettling, and a bathroom carved from Italian marble. It was a palace, a beautiful, empty, silent palace, and it was her prison. For the first few days, Elena felt like a ghost haunting someone else's life. She would wander through the vast, quiet rooms, her footsteps echoing on the polished floors. She was surrounded by unimaginable luxury, but she had never felt more alone. The only company was Mrs. Gable, who spoke only when necessary, and the distant, impersonal presence of Julian. He was rarely there. He left before she woke up and came home long after she had retreated to her wing. When their paths did cross in the vast expanse of the penthouse, their interactions were brief and formal. "Good evening. Did you have a tolerable day? Mrs. Gable can get you anything you need." He never called her Elena. He never asked about Sophia. He was her husband, yet he was a complete stranger, a business partner who happened to share an address. She had everything money could buy, but nothing that she truly wanted. She missed the familiar chaos of the diner. She missed the smell of her own small apartment. She missed the feeling of earning her own way, of being independent. Here she was an object, a beautiful, well-kept accessory to Julian Davenport's mysterious life. One evening she tried to make it feel more like a home. She bought a small, colorful plant and placed it on a table in the living room. The next morning, it was gone. Mrs. Gable informed her, "Mr. Davenport prefers a minimalist aesthetic, madam." The message was clear. "You are a guest here. Do not leave a mark. Do not get comfortable. This is not your home." That night, she stood by the massive window, looking out at the city. She could see the faint lights of her old neighborhood, a world away. She was living the life people dreamed of, a fairy tale rags-to-riches story. But she knew the truth. Weeks bled into a month. Life in the penthouse settled into a sterile routine. Wake up, read, wait, sleep. The only bright spot in Elena's day was her calls with Sophia. The surgery had been a resounding success. Sophia's voice was stronger each day, filled with a future that Elena had bought and paid for with her own. During those calls, Elena would lock herself in her room, the lie of the charity grant heavy on her tongue, but the joy in her sister's voice made the burden feel a little lighter. It was during one of these calls, late one night, that the first crack appeared in Julian's marble facade. He had come home later than usual, his tie loosened, his hair slightly out of place. He looked human. He looked tired. He had stopped in the doorway of the kitchen to get a glass of water, but froze when he heard Elena's laughter. It was a sound he'd never heard before, a pure, unburdened joy. She was finishing her call with Sophia. "Yes, I'm happy," she was saying. "I'm so, so happy. Just hearing you breathe like this makes everything worth it." When she hung up, she finally noticed him standing there. The smile vanished from her face, replaced by the usual guarded politeness. "Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice formal. "I didn't hear you come in." He didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, his expression uncharacteristically soft. "Your sister?" he asked. It was the first time he had ever mentioned Sophia since the day he'd paid the bill. Elena nodded, surprised. "She's doing well. The doctors are amazed at her recovery." A flicker of something crossed his face. Relief? Satisfaction? "That's good," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "That's good news." He walked over to the counter and poured a glass of water, his movements slow and weary. For the first time, Elena saw past the suit and the power. She saw a man carrying a weight of his own. On an impulse, she did something she wasn't supposed to do. She broke the rules. "You look tired," she said softly. Can I make you some tea? My grandmother used to say chamomile could solve any problem a board meeting could create." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It was gone as quickly as it came, but it had been there. "I don't think your grandmother ever met my board," he replied, but he didn't say no. He sat at the cold, modern kitchen island while she moved around the unfamiliar kitchen, finding tea bags and mugs. The silence between them was different this time. It wasn't empty or awkward. It was companionable. She placed the warm mug in front of him. Their fingers brushed for a fraction of a second. It was an electric jolt, a spark of human connection in the sterile emptiness of the penthouse. He took a sip of the tea, his eyes closing for a moment. "Thank you," he said, and it sounded like he meant it. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since they met, not as a janitor, not as a name on a contract, but as the woman sitting across from him. "This life," he said, gesturing vaguely at the opulent surroundings, "it's not always what it seems." It was a cryptic comment, a tiny glimpse behind the curtain. And then, as quickly as the moment came, it was over. He finished his tea, thanked her again with formal politeness, and retreated to his wing. Attendance is mandatory. It's part of the agreement. Julian's words had been curt and direct. A charity gala hosted by his company. It was the first time they would have to appear in public as a couple to play the part of a happily married pair. Eleanor had dreaded it for weeks. A new wardrobe had appeared in her closet, filled with designer gowns. She chose a simple but elegant emerald green dress. When she emerged from her room, Julian was waiting, and for the first time, he seemed momentarily speechless. "You look appropriate," he said, quickly regaining his composure. But she saw that flicker again, that brief, unguarded moment of genuine admiration. It was a small victory, but it gave her a sliver of confidence as they were driven to the event. The gala was everything she had imagined and more. It was a different universe, a glittering spectacle of wealth and power. Men with familiar faces from the news shook Julian's hand, while their wives, dripping in diamonds, gave Eleanor polite but scrutinizing smiles. "Julian, you sly dog, where have you been hiding this lovely creature?" one man boomed. Julian would smile, a tight, practiced smile, and say, "Eleanor and I value our privacy." He played the part of the devoted husband flawlessly. His hand never left her back. He introduced her with pride. To the outside world, they were a power couple. To Elena, it felt like the most elaborate lie she had ever told. She felt like an imposter, a janitor in a princess costume, waiting for the clock to strike midnight, and for everyone to see her for who she really was. She was nursing a glass of champagne when she saw it. A huge banner hung over the stage, emblazoned with a familiar logo and a name: the Davenport Industries Annual Charity Gala. Davenport. Davenport. The name echoed in her mind. Davenport Tower. Mrs. Davenport. Mr. Davenport. The pieces began to click into place with a horrifying, sickening slowness. She looked around, truly seeing the venue for the first time. The logos on the napkins, the insignia on the staff uniforms. It was the same logo as the one on the uniforms of the security guards in the building she used to clean. Her building. The place where she had been invisible. The place where she had met him. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. No, it couldn't be. It was a coincidence, a common name. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Just then, the lights dimmed. A man on stage tapped the microphone. "And now it is my great honor to introduce the man who makes all of this possible, a true leader and philanthropist, the CEO of Davenport Industries, Mr. Julian Davenport." The room erupted in applause, and Elena's world tilted on its axis. She watched, frozen, as the man she had married, the stranger who found her crying, the man who lived in a sterile penthouse, walked onto that stage. He owned it. He owned the building she scrubbed. He owned the company. He wasn't just a powerful man. He was the powerful man, the king of the castle she had only ever been allowed to clean. He stood at the podium, a picture of confidence and authority, and began his speech. Elena didn't hear a word. All she could hear was the roaring in her ears. He hadn't just omitted details. He had lied. He had watched her, night after night, scrubbing his floors, cleaning his toilets, and he had said nothing. The entire arrangement, the chance meeting, it was all a lie, built on a foundation of her own humiliation. The explosion was immediate. The second the penthouse door closed, the polite facade Elena had maintained all evening shattered into a million pieces. All the frustration, the loneliness, the humiliation of the past few months erupted in a torrent of fury. Davenport Industries. She spat the name like it was poison. You own it. You own the building. You let me clean your office, your boardroom. Did you ever see me? Did you ever once see me before that night, or was I just part of the furniture that gets polished after you leave? Julian stood there, his own composure finally cracking under the force of her anger. He looked weary, all the corporate polish stripped away, leaving only the tired man she'd seen in the kitchen. Elena, please, he started. It's not what you think. Isn't it? She shot back, her voice shaking with rage and hurt. You watched me at my lowest point, crying, begging, desperate, and you saw an opportunity, an easy, convenient solution to whatever problem you have. You didn't see a person. You saw an employee you could buy. The accusation hung in the air between them, sharp and heavy. For a long moment, Julian just looked at her, and for the first time she saw true regret in his eyes. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of profound stress. You're right, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I saw you. I saw you long before that night. He walked over to the great window, looking down at the city lights. I saw you every night, he confessed. When I worked late, I would see you. You always had a textbook propped on your cart. You were studying. You were kind to the security guards. You treated the building with a respect that half of my executives don't. I didn't see a janitor, Eleanor. I saw integrity. He turned to face her. And yes, I was desperate. You weren't wrong about that. And then the story came tumbling out. The real story. His grandfather, the patriarch who built Davenport Industries from the ground up, had passed away a year ago. His will was ironclad. To inherit the CEO position and controlling shares of the company, Julian had to be stably married by his 35th birthday. If he wasn't, control would pass to his uncle, a ruthless corporate raider named Marcus Thorne, who planned to gut the company, sell it for parts, and lay off its thousands of employees. Julian's birthday was in 3 weeks. My uncle has been watching my every move, Julian explained, his voice strained. He would have exposed any high society match as a sham. I needed someone real, someone who wasn't part of my world, someone who wouldn't be in it for the money. He looked at her, his gaze intense. That night when I heard you on the phone, I didn't see an opportunity. I saw a parallel. A person trapped by circumstances, willing to do anything to protect their family, just like me. I knew you weren't a gold digger. Your problem was real, your heart was pure. The lie about who I was, that was for your protection. If my uncle knew I had chosen an employee, he would have destroyed you to get to me. Eleanor sank onto one of the cold modern sofas, the anger draining out of her, replaced by a profound, complicated shock. The whole narrative she had built in her head of the cruel billionaire using the poor girl crumbled. This wasn't a story of manipulation. It was a story of mutual desperation. Two people from opposite ends of the universe, both trapped by family, duty, and impossible circumstances. He wasn't a villain. He was a prisoner, just like her. A prisoner in a suit and tie, rattling the bars of his own gilded cage. The revelation changed everything. The tension in the penthouse didn't disappear, but it transformed. It was no longer the cold friction between a boss and his contractual wife. It was the charged energy of two co-conspirators. An unlikely alliance was forged in the stark light of truth. Julian's enemy was now Elena's enemy. His uncle, Marcus Thorne, was a shadow hanging over them. Julian explained how Marcus was sniffing around, trying to find any dirt he could to prove their marriage was a fraud, before the final board vote that would secure Julian's position after his birthday. He thinks you're my weakness, Julian said, looking at a file with Marcus's picture on it. He thinks you're the loose thread he can pull to unravel everything. A wry smile touched Elena's lips. "People have underestimated me my whole life," she said. "Let him." And so Elena went from being a prisoner in the penthouse to being its queen strategist. She had a unique perspective that none of Julian's high-priced lawyers or consultants could ever have, the view from the ground floor. She knew the building not as a corporate headquarters, but as a living, breathing organism. She knew its rhythms, its secrets, its people. "Your uncle is looking for spies in the boardroom," she told Julian one evening, as they strategized over a late-night dinner they now shared. "He's not looking in the break rooms. He's not listening to the security guards or the maintenance crew." For years, she had been invisible. Now she decided to weaponize that invisibility. She started visiting the Davenport Tower during the day, not as a janitor, but as Mrs. Davenport. She brought coffee and pastries for the morning security shift, the men and women she knew by name, the ones Julian's executives walked past every day without a glance. She remembered their kids' names, asked about their families. They trusted her, and they talked. They told her about a new consultant who was always asking strange questions, a man who fit the description of one of Marcus's lackeys. She learned which executives met with him after hours. She learned about the documents he was trying to access. She was gathering intelligence from the ground up, using the currency of kindness and respect, a language the world of corporate espionage didn't understand. She saw things Julian couldn't. She noticed a pattern in the cleaning schedules that suggested someone was accessing secure floors after the system was supposed to be locked down. She remembered a hushed conversation she'd once overheard between two IT guys about a network vulnerability they were told to ignore by a mid-level manager, a manager who, she discovered, was deep in gambling debt. She would bring these puzzle pieces to Julian at night. He would listen, initially with skepticism and then with growing awe. She wasn't just giving him gossip, she was giving him actionable intelligence. She was connecting dots no one else could see, because no one else had ever bothered to look at the dots she was familiar with. He started to see her not just as a woman of integrity, but as a brilliant, strategic mind. The respect between them grew, blossoming into a genuine partnership. The lines of their contract began to blur. They were no longer just playing the part of a married couple. They were becoming a team. One night he found her sketching in a notebook, designing a more efficient workflow for the building's maintenance staff. "You see the world differently than anyone I've ever met," he said, his voice filled with sincere admiration. The day of the board meeting arrived. It was Julian's 35th birthday. This was the final hurdle, the vote to ratify his position as permanent CEO. The air in the boardroom was electric with tension. Eleanor could feel the weight of every gaze on her. They saw a janitor in a designer suit, the woman who had inexplicably captured the city's most eligible bachelor. They were waiting for her to crumble. Marcus Thorne circled the table like a shark. He began his presentation with a smug, theatrical air. He spoke of legacy, of responsibility, and of the questionable and hasty decisions Julian had made recently, his eyes landing on Elena with undisguised contempt. "Chief among them," Marcus declared, "is his marriage. A marriage of convenience, a sham, designed for the sole purpose of subverting the wishes of his late grandfather." He presented his evidence, photos of Elena at her old apartment, her meager bank statements from before the marriage, an interview with a disgruntled diner co-worker who claimed Elena would do anything for money. It was a weak circumstantial case, but in the conservative world of the board, it was enough to plant the seeds of doubt. "This is not a marriage," Marcus sneered. "It is a business transaction, and it invalidates the terms of the will." He looked at Julian, expecting him to fight back, to defend himself, but Julian remained silent. He simply looked at Elena and gave her a subtle nod. It was her move. Elena stood up. The room went silent. All eyes were on her. She didn't look at Marcus. She looked at the faces of the board members. "You're right, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the silence. This was not a conventional courtship. A murmur went through the room. Marcus smiled, thinking he had won. "My husband and I did not meet at a gala or a charity auction. I met him when I was at my lowest point, when I was fighting for my sister's life, and he saw me, when no one else did." She then turned her attention to Julian. "But what Mr. Thorne sees as a weakness, this board should see as a strength. Your former CEO, Julian's grandfather, built this company by seeing value where others saw nothing. He invested in people, Julian did the same. He didn't invest in a name or a pedigree. He invested in a person. Then, she played her hand. But let's talk about who is really a threat to this company's legacy. She calmly presented the information she had gathered. The name of the IT manager, Marcus, was blackmailing. The security logs showing unauthorized access to the company's server, originating from the consultant Marcus had hired, the hushed conversations and the network vulnerabilities. She laid out a clear, undeniable pattern of corporate sabotage, engineered by Marcus himself, to devalue the company stock before a planned hostile takeover by a competitor he was secretly in league with. She wasn't just defending her marriage, she was defending the company. The board was stunned. Marcus's smug expression dissolved into pure panic. He stuttered, denied, but the evidence was overwhelming. He wasn't just a greedy uncle, he was a traitor. In that moment, Eleanor wasn't a janitor or a trophy wife. She was the most powerful person in the room. In the aftermath of the board meeting, the world settled. Marcus Thorne was ousted, his conspiracy exposed. The company, under Julian's secure leadership, was thriving. And in the penthouse, the silence was finally replaced by warmth. Eleanor had slowly, carefully begun to leave her mark. A splash of color here, a personal touch there. Julian didn't just allow it, he encouraged it. He loved seeing her life blend with his. Sophia, now fully recovered, was a frequent visitor, her laughter echoing in rooms that had once been tombs of solitude. The arrangement, the one-year contract, was technically still in effect, but no one ever mentioned it. It was a relic of a past that felt like a different lifetime. One evening, as the one-year anniversary of their strange City Hall wedding approached, Julian came home with a small velvet box. He found Elena on the balcony, watching the sunset. The air was comfortable between them, filled with an easy affection that had grown from the ashes of their business deal. "The year is almost up," he said softly, his voice full of an emotion she had never heard from him before. "Our contract is nearly fulfilled. You are free, Elena. I've had my lawyers draw up a settlement. It's more than enough to ensure you and Sophia are taken care of for the rest of your lives. You'll never have to worry about money again." He held out the legal documents to her. Elena looked at the papers, then back at him. She saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of losing her. She didn't take the papers. "Is that what you want, Julian?" she asked quietly. "For me to leave?" He shook his head, his composure finally breaking completely. He took her hands in his. "No," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's the last thing I want. Elena, this past year, it started as a contract, a means to an end, but it became the best thing that ever happened to me. You didn't just save my company. You saved me. From my loneliness, from my own cold world. You taught me to see the value in people, not just in profits. You taught me how to live." He let go of her hands and opened the velvet box. Inside wasn't a giant, flashy diamond. It was a simple, beautiful ring with an emerald at its center, the color of the dress she wore the night their world changed. He got down on one knee, there on the balcony, with the entire city as his witness. "The old contract is void," he said, his eyes shining. "I want to offer you a new one with no end date, no clauses, no business, just a promise. To love you, to honor you, to build a real life with you, not as Mr. and Mrs. Davenport, the CEO and his wife, but as Julian and Elena. Partners, in everything. Elena Ramirez, will you marry me, and for real this time?" Tears streamed down Elena's face, but for the first time in so long, they were tears of pure joy. She didn't need to think. She already knew the answer. This strange, impossible journey, which began with a desperate bargain to save a life, had led her to find her own. We often look for love in all the expected places. We judge people by their titles, their bank accounts, their uniforms. But sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight. True value is not found in a person's position, but in their character. True strength is not in power, but in empathy. And the most profound love stories are not written in fairy tales, but are forged in the fires of real life, often born from the most unexpected of contracts. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful life lessons every week.